Over the weekend, it was this doom-ridden graph that revealed the extent to which the government has decimated our economy. While countries like the United Arab Emirates and the US are attracting thousands of millionaires, the United Kingdom is scaring them off. A projected 16,000 are set to leave. And you may think the government would attempt to turn this round by making the UK a more attractive place to live. But it was the former Labour leader, Lord Kinnock, who said yesterday that the party was considering implementing wealth taxes. Well, I'm joined now by former Political Secretary to Sir Tony Blair, John McTernan. John, it's a pleasure to have you on the programme again. Wealth taxes have been tried in other countries. They just get wealthy people to leave, don't they?
It depends what tax you're using, and it depends what wealth you're taxing. A lot of the wealth in the UK is in domestic property. I think that property is under-taxed at the moment, and I could imagine a wealth tax that did actually generate some revenue for local government, for social care, stabilise those services. It could also stabilise the health service. So there's more than one way to approach the issue of where's the wealth and how can we tax it.
Well, you say that our property is under-taxed, but haven't we got the highest property taxes in the G7?
We're under-taxed.
So we're under-taxed, but we're still the highest in the G7. So everyone else is massively under-taxed.
The Buckingham Palace pays less council tax than a semi in Blackpool. And that, for me, is unfair.
That's completely irrelevant, because anybody who buys a property in London costing a couple of £1 million will pay a 15% stamp duty.
Well, I think there's loads of rigidities in the tax system that we should reform, and wealth tax would be one part of a whole package. I don't think we actually are in a situation where we should be picking one tax here and one tax there anymore. The thing is quite a extensive tax code that could do with some simplification that would be fair, could be fair, and could generate more revenue.
Let's focus on capital taxes, because there seems to me there is difficulty with capital taxes in that they don't have a cash flow associated with them. So when you pay stamp duty, there is a transaction, there is cash available. When you have a charge on people's assets, they don't actually have the cash to get it, and they've got to get the cash from taxed income. That's extremely difficult for most people, unless they're not just millionaires, but billionaires.
Yeah, but we're looking at a situation where we're trying to find a fair way to raise the revenue required for public services, and taxing capital and balancing the tax on capital compared to the tax on labour is a fair way to move forward.
But is it? Because capital gains tax and death duties both try to raise cash when there is some element of transaction. They have their difficulties because capital gains tax is essentially voluntary and death duties can be planned around, but at least there is something happening which makes cash available. With a wealth tax, where is the money coming from? Because you can't sell 2% of your house.
No, but you can rent 2% of your house, can't you? If your house is under-occupied, if you're a council tenant, you've got a bedroom tax, which is a pressure downwards on you to try to move you out of your property to a different, smaller property. If you're occupying, which a lot of people are in the private sector who are homeowners, then
what if you're not
a little incentive to stay working a bit longer, or a little
so
incentive.
Are you basically? I'm delighted to hear this, because you're basically saying I'm exempt because I've got 6 children and therefore my house is fully occupied. Indeed, probably be over-occupied on the council's judgment.
On the days and nights that they're always around with you. But the thing about kids, as you must know, is that they're constantly growing older, and eventually they leave you, and then you'll have a choice about the size of house you have and the location of the house.
Well, are you, is Neil Kinnock proposing a wealth tax of this kind that you'll pay only if you're not using your bedrooms, and if you take in a lodger, you'll get a discount?
No, Neil is proposing, I think, a different tax from me. I'm just pointing out that wealth is around us in many, many ways. During the pandemic, when the economy was quite quiet, £2 trillion increase in domestic property value, that is a form of windfall because people weren't actually improving the economy, but their houses got much more valuable. We need to look at a wide range of ways of raising revenue.
But it's not a windfall because they can't do anything with it. They've got to live in their house. Anyway, I'm going to have to move on there, but John, thank you for joining me. With me now is the Shadow Business Secretary, Andrew Griffith. Andrew, we're going to find it very difficult to disagree on this, but I happen to think that capital taxation creates the most inefficiencies in the economy, and that the aim of any Conservative government ought to be to remove as many of them as possible, not to add new ones.
Look, absolutely right. I agree, Jacob, we're probably not going to disagree, but it's just depressing. The lack of understanding from this government. I mean, they genuinely believe there's a magic money tree. It is insane when people are voting with their feet. Some of the people that pay... We have a hugely progressive tax system in this country. The top 1% pay fully 30% of all income tax. Imagine a system that's so precarious as that if that top 1% leave, as we're seeing day by day more evidence mounting that they are, that everybody else is going to have to pay more to make good that 30% hole in income tax. You're right on capital taxes. And the great learning over time is that actually there's a sweet spot in tax. It's why Ireland has one of the highest levels of individual prosperity, GDP per capita, the amount of their economy, their living standards, because they discovered what many people already knew, particularly Art Laffer, the great economist, that if you at some points reduce tax, you actually raise more money. Then you can go and do things that socialists love doing, spending money on our unreformed public services, redistributing wealth within society. But you do that off the back of a bigger cake to start off with.
OK, but we both supported Liz Truss, and she tried this, and she was out within 7 weeks.
And as you know, subsequent investigations into things like the Bank of England and the degree of concentration of our pension funds in gilts undoubtedly played a role around that. I'm not going into the individual execution of things, but look, that has to be where the Conservative Party, the consistent party of economic competence that believes in people keeping more of what they earn and government spending the minimum consistent with providing a basic safety net in society, that to me is where the Conservative Party is right to pitch its tents. And it's probably no coincidence that we've had a few good weeks, actually, and Kemi's done a lot of talking about the economy, about some honest truths about the state we're in, but also talking about those first principle Conservative values as it comes to the economy.
How do we deal with the general constraints? So we've got a demand for extra public services, we've got an ageing population, we've got a demand for more immigration, but strong political opposition to it.
I've never seen where this demand for more immigration comes from, to be honest. You'll find the odd employer or some left-wing,
from employers, from universities.
And things.
When we were in office, the education minister wanted more immigration for the universities, the health minister wanted more for the hospitals.
Yeah, well, so, as you know, the job of ministers is not simply to amplify whatever
you were asking me where this demand comes from. So we want to cut taxes, but the popular demand seems to be for public services to get more money, and there are demographic things going against us. How would a Conservative government deal with that?
Look, I think very much like the situation that the Conservative government found it in the 1970s, that ultimately, by endlessly taxing fewer and fewer people more and more, you end up destroying economic growth in the economy. The remarkable thing is that it's taken this government only 12 months, what it took socialists in the 1970s years to do in terms of the economy. Partly that's because capital and people are more mobile. We are in a more competitive world. We're just scraping into the top 30 countries in terms of global competitiveness. We have to fight to be a place that people want to come and live and invest or even stay. And the role of the Conservatives is to tell the hard truths. And look, the reality is, I suspect by telling those hard truths, there is a certain period of time at which popularity doesn't follow. People don't like to be confronted with the fact that we are all living beyond our means. But if we are the party that A, believes in that from first principles, and B, is willing to articulate that, eventually, when the crisis that is, I'm afraid, beholden in our economy now becomes clear to more and more people because their children can't get jobs, because they see their standard of living slipping away versus other European or international countries, then I would hope that the country comes back to the Conservatives.
If we were to be returned, do we have to cut spending before we cut taxes, or can you take the risk of doing both simultaneously?
Look, I think both. I think you have to cut taxes to allow growth to happen. When you're at a historic high in the level of taxation, and by the way, I heard the previous interview, we have wealth taxes in abundance in this country. We have nearly 15% stamp duty. We have taxes if someone has the temerity to take a business class flight, and on, higher taxes if you've got a more expensive car. Believe me, we have wealth taxes, and we don't need any socialists coming up with even more of those. But I think you cut tax to get growth, and you cut spending in order to cut tax. So I think you have to do both of those things. I don't want to relitigate the past. The Conservative Party did make many mistakes in office. I'm not shy of apologising for those mistakes. But, like a toddler, it's not enough to apologise. You've got to say what it is you will do differently when we get back into office. And I'm very clear, we have to spend less of taxpayers' money, and we have to get economic growth in a proper sense. And the only real way of doing that from a really high level of tax is to reduce taxes. And as I can't make tax policy, and I won't, and it is important that we are credible.
You probably make very good tax policy.
But those inheritance taxes, in particular, are ones that most Conservatives find very egregious.
All right, well, the Conservative Party is a toddler.